Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss a very important topic, which is writing a good code, writing a good Python code basically. So there are certain rules that we just need to follow while writing a good and optimized code. Why I started this conversation because I have taken so many interviews, so people are they're good for writing a solution maybe, but they're not writing optimized code. But in organizations nowadays, we do have a code optimization tools available. Like for example, any code you have written, so they check the quality of your code. If it is not good, you have to rework it. So I'm here to let you know some simple and important rules for writing a clean and optimized Python code. So let's start with the first very important rule, which is like you just need to follow PEP8 guidelines for coding style. What is PEP8 guidelines? So there is a guidelines which is released from Python itself. So it gives you like some rules. So if you follow those rules, it's like for having a good coding style, you could say. So it's a big list, but I'm just pointing few of them. Like if you follow the official website, you will get to know. But first is indentations. So in Python there are 4 spaces. If you use a particular ID, so it is by default there, and you select a Python as a language. But still, like indentation is one of the important part. Second is the length of the line. So you should limit the line of the code that you're writing. For example, either you are writing a comment or a code. So it should not be very lengthy. You should short it to limit the lines of the code to 29 and comments at 72. So that is the style guide given by PEP8 basically. Third is the blank line. So when you are writing a particular function or class, there should be a gap in between those. So just enter a line. There should be a blank line. Then you can start writing a separate function or class. Naming convention. So it should follow the snake cases. Like function name, whatever you go, it should be meaningful. It should connect it with underscore. Like class name, if you are giving, like it should follow the Pascal case. Constant should be uppercase. Variable name also should be snake cases. So these are some naming conventions. I have taken certain examples for this. I'll show you how it looks like. Imports. Whenever you're writing your code, so you do certain imports, maybe for external libraries or internal, different Python files. You have put it somewhere and you're importing to that file. So those imports should be grouped together. So like standard library, third party, and local import, it should be grouped together. So these are the PEP8 style guide for Python code. That's the very first thing. Second is write meaningful and descriptive name. As I said, for example, any variable you have written. So it should, itself explain what is you are doing into that particular variable or the function name. So like, for example, you're calculating the total price. So the function name, you cannot write like CTP or some many different names. So you should give a meaningful name and it should connect with underscore, like I have given here, calculate underscore total underscore price. So this is the correct way of giving a name of the function or maybe the particular variable. Third is use docstring and comments. Like whenever you are writing the code, so might be the code you have written, you today you're working for that project, maybe after some time you look back to that code, or somebody else after you is going through with your code. So you should add proper docstring and comment to the code. Comment is like whatever this particular piece of code does, you write a comment. It should not be very lengthy. It should be to the point, so that this particular piece of information anybody can understand. That's what is happening here in this particular piece of code. Apart from this docstring, so docstring is like here if you see that there is a function for add, like you're adding two numbers. So I have added a docstring here. So in docstring itself, you should mention what the function does, what are the arguments we're using, and what are the data type for that. So if somebody using that function, they know that this is the expectation of the argument. Like here, arguments are integer required, like AB should be integer, and it is returning integer itself. So this is what the correct way for adding docstring to your function. Next is function, whatever the function you write, it should be short and focused. Might be sometime if you're writing a particular piece of code, that function got very lengthy. So rather than putting everything into one function, you just break down into two separate functions, and the other function that you have created, you can utilize into that first function. So for there is a cognitive complexity, we call it, when we check, like might be any particular, the tool you are using for checking the code quality. So it give you like just reduce the cognitive complexity for that function. It should be into like a small function, not a very lengthy, so that it's typical to understand what it is doing. So I hope it's clear. Next is use the comprehensions and generator for simplicity. Like for example, there is something where you have to write a for loop or certain if else condition and like that. So if you can do the particular piece into comprehension, so use the comprehension in place of writing for loop or if else and all. So it's a good practice. Next is, for example, whenever you're writing your code, it always remember that this should not be anything which is hard coded. Like for example, you added certain hard coded value and you are using that hard coded value 100 time into that piece of code, or maybe more than 100 times. So if any change come to that hard coded value, you have to make changes 100 places. So just to avoid that thing, you just give a basically the constant instead of hard coding that particular value. So here, if you look at like discount rate, I have given as a constant. So it is like, for example, now the value of the discount rate is 0.1. Tomorrow maybe it's going to be changed, and discount rate you're using n number of places in your code. So you have to make change everywhere. So just to avoid that, just give a constant, and so you just make change to one place and it will be replicated everywhere. So please make sure just avoid hard coding into your code. Next is handle exceptions based. That's one of the important things. So your code should not fail. Like whatever you are writing, you should handle all the exceptions gracefully. It should give a proper, the message what is happening. Like for example, here it's a zero division error. So whenever this error comes, it will be giving like division by zero is not allowed. So user can easily understand what happened, what you did. So, like, try and accept is one of the most important part to handle the exceptions gracefully. Next is use type annotation. So, type annotation means like whenever you are writing a class or a function. So, first case is just mention what is the type of that argument. Like I already explained in the above points. Apart from this, like if there is any dynamic value, so what's supposed to be added here? So like for example, here I have added name into those curly braces. This is a dynamic part, so I'm expecting name to be here, and the type of name is a string. So it's a good practice to improve the code readability. Next is write unit test. Like if you're writing a particular piece of code, it is a very good practice that you create unit test for that function or that .py file, whatever you have added. So you can use unit test or pytest, any library which is available. It is for the kind of a Python backend development, but yeah, anything like nowadays, if you see like we data scientists, machine learning people also writing a lot of Python code. So if it is there, follow a practice to write unit test cases also. Next is limit cognitive complexity, that I already told. Don't put a very lengthy function. So it should be a small, and it should not have multiple conditional statement inside that. So you just create small functions, and then whatever you supposed to write into a very lengthy function, just break that lengthy one into some small function. It's a good practice. Next is use virtual environment. Like for example, you're working on a multiple projects, so it's a good practice to use virtual environment, so that dependencies, like for example, one project you require certain version, for other project you require certain version. So if you're using virtual environment, it's a good practice to manage the dependencies and avoiding conflicts between different packages that you're using. Next is Python. Like you don't need to write everything from scratch. Like Python is given so many standard libraries, modules, so you just leverage those, use those. rather than writing everything from scratch, like very common functions like date and time, calculations, regular expression, sorry, collections, OS. So you just import and use it. Random is there. So just putting everything from scratch, it's not a good practice. Just leverage the standard modules or libraries available in Python. Next is we call it a dry principle. Dry principle means like your code should not be should not have like duplicate line of lot of duplicate line of code. So if you're using, if you're working in any organization, they are tracking the quality of your code, so they'll let you know what percentage is the duplicacy available into your entire code that you have pushed or the project that you're working for. So dry principle means don't repeat yourself. Like if there is something which is required to be used into multiple places, so what you can do, just make it reusable. So you can use a object oriented programming. So create a class and then initialize it and use it to other functions. So you just reuse, make a reusable code rather than duplicating that particular code block. You just make it reusable. It's a good practice. Next is just avoid global variables. So limit the use of global variables. You can pass the parameter explicitly to function, or you may use the class attribute wherever is necessary. So it's not a good practice to have lot of global variables. Next is the last point is use context manager for resource management. What is that basically? So for example, the example I have added here, like for file handling and some other resources, you can use context manager to automatically handle cleanup. So if you see that the open function here is working as a context manager, so it will take care of reading, just opening and closing of your file. So it's a good practice to use the context manager. If you see, I have added some more additional example for context manager available in Python, like for the IO operations like open, ggp open. For database connections, you always close and connect and close the connection. It's a good practice. For network connection like socket, you use threading lock, threading R locks for temporary files and directly. So these are some points, like 5 points I've added here. If you follow the, not 5, it's 15 point I have added here. So if you follow all these 15 points, slowly and gradually try to add into your daily coding style. So this way, like you will slowly and gradually, you will start learning a very good and optimized code. So that's it for today. I hope you follow, and it's going to help you in interviews also. People ask like, what are the coding rules you follow? What are the good coding practices? And so you can easily answer. So I hope it's clear to everyone. That's it for today. Thank you so much.